recently was walking the halls of Evans Middle School, walking through Sophie's like day, kind of just seeing what it's like. And one of the things that I noticed was, there are a lot of stairs. Like she has classrooms right next to each other, but during the day, it's like she's up here and then she'll be next door in 3 class periods. First, she has to go downstairs, kind of thing. But there's just something about the joy of the teachers in the hallway. They're naming students, they're high-fiving. When school was coming, did you guys feel like, yes, this I can't wait? Or were you like, summer's over? What was your heartbeat, attitude, kind of? Did it change from elementary to middle school?
I still have recurring nightmares of like, I have this to this day of like, I get my class schedule and I don't know where my class is.
Oh,
like, you know what I mean? Where you're like, I'm going through and I'm like, and then I miss it and I'm late. So that would tell you, I didn't like going back to school probably.
Do you have the one where you know you are not prepared for an assignment?
Yeah.
And it's just sitting in your head and your heartache and you're not done.
Yeah. And I wake up and I'm like, I'm 30 years old. Like,
Yeah.
what is it? Yeah. It's terrifying.
You're 30 years old.
It's terrifying. Both, all of those things.
All the years. Craig?
I have a dream where I've gotten to I can tell it's like end of the semester. And I realized there's a class I never went to. Like, and I'm trying to figure
I've
out,
had that one where like all of a sudden, like midway through, you're like,
what? You haven't done all my classes.
haven't found it and haven't been showing up even. Welcome to the Something Different podcast, where our heartbeat is to help you get to where you want to be. You are somewhere, but it's not where you want to be. So we're going to introduce you to something different, and hopefully it'll help you proceed. As always, I am Pastor Marty, and this is my good friend, Craig. We got Derek, and here we are, living the dream. September, can you believe it?
Man, we knew it was going to go fast, and it did.
Summer, gone.
Yes.
Gone. And I am all in favor of 5 months of fall. By far my favorite season.
Yep.
I want to touch every season, but man, 5 months of fall. I'm a sweatshirt jeans kind of guy. I like the light jacket. I don't want stocking cap. I don't want to have to scrape a window, but I like the little chill. The smell of burned leaves, not for me, but it does remind me that fall, it's coming.
Yep.
It's coming. Do you have a kind of fall thing you look forward to? I'm guessing it's not the pumpkin spice latte. That's not your jam. Is there a pumpkin spice Diet Coke?
There probably is.
But there needs to be. Can you imagine?
I'm a purist.
Oh,
just the perfect chemicals of Diet Coke.
As long as it's got aspartame, that's all. That's
right.
all it needs.
I don't know what you just said. It doesn't sound like it.
Fake sweetener.
Were we supposed to
may cause cancer? Yeah, just bleep that out.
Have you seen the commercial, or I don't know, like you make your own like Pepsi at home, like you carbon your water, and like it almost looks like Keurig for pop,
like a Soda Stream type of thing.
Yeah. I'm like, I want all the work done for me. I don't want to have to do the work.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Wild times. Well, today, here's the thought. There's a difference between change and transition. So if you're watching this, I want you to understand, like most of the time we think those words are interchangeable, and that's allowed. Like, there's a change upcoming, there's a transition upcoming, right? But there's enough nuances that if you properly understand, I can guarantee this will help your heart and help you understand why things hurt or why things are difficult when things change. So to kind of start us off, change is more situational, and it's concrete, and it's done. Give me an example of a change, like something that would fit into that category.
We had a second kid.
Okay, so
we had one kid, and now we have two.
Now we have two kids. Okay, so there's an example. You got one.
Kids go back to school.
Kids go back to school. They weren't in school. Now they are in school. Okay, now transition is more about the psychological, more about the emotional, as well as the byproduct of, I would say, smaller changes that are related to the big change. So let's go. You had one child. Now you have dose. That's the change. What's the transition been like?
Yeah, sleepless nights, more diapers, hit to the budget. Yeah, a lot of different transitions.
I'm sure you and Rachel are getting lots of alone time.
Yep.
Lots of,
Mm-hmm.
I love the money stuff.
Yep.
Scout, your pup, your dog.
Bottom of the totem pole. Keeps going down the rungs. Yep.
How about kids going back to school?
Yeah.
That's the change. They were home for summer. Now they're at school. Transition. How's that hit?
Yeah. Even just schedule wise, trying to get our kids to like dial in their bedtime anywhere close. What a rude awakening when all of a sudden you have to get up for school and it's like 2 hours earlier than you're used to getting up.
Are your children more apt to be like, hey, it's time, or do they have an idea, or do they put themselves to bed? For example, like Toby, pretty keen on knowing. Blythe, when we say, hey, it's time for bed, she goes. Sophie like tucks herself in and we're like, where'd she go? Where did she go? And Lydia, honestly, she just struggles to sleep. And so we're like, hey, she slept, this is great. How are you?
Finley, our daughter, middle child, is the disciplined
I owe her $5. We've said her name.
One, yeah. And then our two boys, older and younger, they are the go to bed. Well, they like to go to bed when they want to go to bed. You realize that if you want to go to bed, you're mad at anybody that wants to keep you up.
Oh.
If you want to stay up, why doesn't everybody want to stay up? So the number of mornings that Finley comes down and said, the boys were up in the hallway till like 12 o'clock. I couldn't sleep.
That's the normative. Okay. So give me back. I want to get you back to the topic here. There's a change. And like what we wrestle with sometimes is that change is hard. And I would say the change is like, I lived one place, now I live in another place. That's the change. What I'm really dealing with, though, that makes it hard is the transition. Like I have to find a new doctor. I got to find new friends. I got to find a new network. I got to find and so many times when people are pushing back against change, I would say they're not really pushing back on change. They're pushing back on the transition. Yeah. And so today, I say it's about change and transition, but really it's about how do we deal with transition? Because change happens in an instant, whereas transition, that's a gradient. Like different people process things at different speeds. Sometimes things happen and it almost feels like it's the merry-go-round where we're still trying to figure this change out, even though the change happened. Mm-hmm. Like I bet in 2 weeks, we're still trying to figure out the bedtime rhythm. Well, they're back to school. Mm-hmm. We have a bedtime rhythm, but the transition, here we are. How old is Theo?
3 going on 4 months.
He's getting not $5 from
Yep.
3. And so 3 months in, like, not only are you still figuring out the initial transition of 1 to 2, but you're trying, like, he keeps changing.
Yeah.
Right. And so transition is something that is less concrete. It's more. And so read a book years ago, 20 years ago. I read this book and it radically like shifted something in me, so much so that this is probably a staff meeting every 3 years, if not more. It's one of the leadership talks I travel with, and it's how do you manage transition? And I think when you recognize the transition is my emotional attachment, it's my feelings, it's people from a work setting. Let's just go with the Bridge Church. You become attached to what you do and who you do it with. So if there is a change in what you do, that's a change, but the transition is I was personally attached to how we used to do it. Now we do it a different way. Or if someone who was a part of the team is not with the team anymore for whatever reason, like I used to work with them and now they're not here, I'm feeling all of that. And so what I have found just to be so helpful is to recognize that there are 3 stages to transition. And they sound kind of out of order when you first hear them, but when we kind of walk it through, I think this will be helpful. And so there is an ending. The change from A to B created an ending. A is no more. And so transition is actually bringing closure or recognition that how it used to be done or with who it used to be done or what used to take place no longer is taking place, and there's time. Then it moves to what I would call the gray area. In the book that I read, it's called the neutral zone. And this is where you are not where you used to be, but you are not where you're going. Can I get an amen? That feels like, I don't know, life, right? Right. Yep. All of the different ways where you're like, this isn't like that. and I hope we get to hear how many times is it like when we, that's called the gray area, the neutral zone. And then you enter into the third and final phase, which is beginning, different than start. Start is a lot like change. It's concrete. Like your kids start school, but the beginning of the school year, that's an element of transition. So what I want to do is I want to kind of share a personal one that I'm kind of going through. And then we're the three of us, we're navigating one professionally. And in order for this, I think to unlock something for you who are listening, watching, subscribing, commenting, thumbs upping, adding value to more people being able to find this when they search, they told me to tell you that like it helps us. So like, subscribe, hit the buttons, do that thing. If you're that person who's listening to the Something Different podcast right now, if you can visualize what is a change transition that you're personally or professionally wrestling with, and then see if some of the things we share don't all of a sudden connect some dots for you. So ours, the one front and center, is Toby is no longer living at home. We didn't kick him out. We trained him up to go out. And so we are in that. It is done. He has left the home. His room is empty. We don't go by it because we will shed a tear. My daughter, Lydia, literally, she was returning some money that she had borrowed. And I'm like, you could have kept that because he didn't gonna know you put it back in his room. And she comes down the stairs and I'm like, are you okay? And she's like, don't go up there. And she's just like feeling it all the way. And you're like, oh, it's so, and so I know he'll visit. I know we'll visit him. But we're in this but I don't know what the new is. I don't know what it's like to communicate. Literally, he doesn't have a cell phone for the first week. So we're in this kind of we're ending getting to see him. He plays ping pong every day, at least 3 times with Jenny. And she's been winning most of the time. It's, whoa. Oh man, don't mess with her on it.
That's legit.
That's where her language starts to struggle when she's playing ping pong. Miss Jenny Schmidt, Pastor Jenny, she would destroy me for saying all this, but she drops awesome. She drops a dang it when she hits one out, and
really risky.
That offended you. Well, tune in. We got her in, and we'll lecture her on the next podcast. But I'm in this spot where we're in that also neutral zone too of this is the new norm, but I don't know what it's like. Recently, we played at disc golf every Wednesday. Well, he wasn't there. So I went and it was just different. Right. And so I hope in that illustration, you can recognize oh, what's the change? The change is already done. Yeah. He's gone, but working out all of the best picture I can imagine is a billiards table. Not saying I'm pretty good, but I'm not bad. I'm no shark, but I'll hold my own. And if you line up the cue ball to maybe say we want to hit the 1 ball, usually yellow on there, depending on and I hit that, unless I am just a little bit off, and I could still make it. That cue ball, it's going to go and it's going to hit other things. This is where it comes into, if you are a leader, you have to recognize you are only seeing the result you're trying to create. I'm just trying to hit this ball into this ball. And you're unaware sometimes that by the choices you make, the decisions you make, and who you make them with, it actually creates ramifications for other people.
That's so good. Yeah.
Pastor Craig, we had a change recently at your campus. We've had numerous changes at your campus. One of them was in the worship department where we had Jake and Haley.
Yeah.
Love them.
It was awesome.
They got Texas sick, as I call it. So they were with us for a season. Then they moved back to Texas. And now you're leading worship.
Right. Praise God.
Yeah. So the changes, then I as the leader, I'm like,
yeah,
we'll figure it out. But Sunday's coming.
Yeah.
They're not here. What are some of the emotions that come to like that ending with them? How do you do endings well? How do we
You load their U-Haul.
Yeah.
It's about 100 degrees, and I was one in the U-Haul.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, just celebrating them and always realizing like they're going through a lot of change. And so, but I think one of the things that's true with change is you tend to feel the loss before you can see the opportunity. And I would say, I mean, it's just part of the Bridge Church and in our culture. I mean, it could be a part of any work culture, but just being ready to change, because if you don't change, there's losses that come with that, you know?
That's good.
Yeah.
And so just kind of getting used to that and a little bit of trusting the team too.
Yeah.
Right.
So the more you can have people around you in your change and transition, that helps as well.
Yeah. And I think what you said was so good. Like relationally, like we say goodbye.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think recognizing that other people are impacted by this. So if I recall, like you shared with the whole church, like, hey, we're thankful. Toby's at Wheaton College. And I mean, I would just say high five. Their recognition of first-time parents dropping off kids was pretty elite. Like my parents were like, high five me as I packed up my Geo Metro, you know, and I just brought myself to college. And like, Toby's a homebody. He's done a lot with us. And maybe we parented like, you know, too smothering, but like at the college, they said, all right, before your student leaves, because they all loaded up on a bus together, why don't you pray with your child? That's and good. I got to tell you, like, that meant a lot.
Yeah, for sure.
The changes he's leaving, but how I grieve, how I say goodbye, how I relationally connect in that moment is significant. Other endings happen because of other endings. So Pastor Derek, in light of the transition in Fairfield, I shoulder tapped the worship leader at your campus and I said, I'm borrowing him for 10 weeks, ? And we're going to, good luck. Like, right. Yeah. So you had a change as well, but your change was different.
Yep.
The transition there was like the change. Now you're like in this limbo, like, okay, so your guy's not gone, but he's gone for you.
Yep.
So walk me through some of the things that come to mind for you of like what helps you in that land of in between?
Yeah.
What are things that matter, right?
Yeah, I think like, so when you brought that up to me, my first thing was like, I want to see, okay, what's the win that we're looking for here? And immediately I was like, well, Fairfield needs a worship leader. So like, I was like, that's the win. That's what we're chasing after. And so the other cue balls that are going to get hit is in favor of landing that in the pocket, making sure Fairfield doesn't go without a worship leader for 10 weeks. And so that was the first thing. Well, I mean, yeah. And it's all Logan. He's done incredible.
Super proud of him.
And so for me, it was like, I'm going to lose this guy. I love him. And I'm looking for the fruit of like, I know he's going to be a blessing to that campus for this season. It also helps out that we have Matt who can backfill and cover for a lot of weeks. So it wasn't like I was left without one. There was a plan in play to help with that, but seeing the win, like choosing to see the good things, like almost believing the best. That was what, like, I was like, okay, I'm going to see like things are going to be missed and I'm going to have grace for that because I know what the ultimate win we're looking for is. So,
yeah. And I think, just identifying who's losing what is part of that ability to lead well. You recognizing what was lost there, me recognizing what was lost in both. And also, I think establishing what the problem or challenge is, because if there's not clarity on that, like if I just said, hey, we're plucking him up and we're dropping him here, and you're like, no, you are aware of what the current challenge is. And so I think in this, like many times changes are made with the intent of fixing something that could be better, or if we don't fix something, eventually it's going to get broken.
Yeah.
So as a leader, I'm more prone to like react, respond, initiate before other people see the problem or what could end up being a problem if we don't do something now. And so there are many times the staff find out I'm changing something and they weren't even aware of the change, let alone was it even broken? And so in the last, I would say 5 years, I've tried way harder to go, are we aware why we have to spend time on this? Are we aware of why? So different from the situation that we've kind of been dialoguing about as far as a worship kind of, when a change is happening because there's a problem or a perpetual walk towards upcoming difficulty, if we aren't able to name it and other people hear it, they're going to be more disruptive, right? In that. The second thing is just, who is this going to impact? So that's kind of ending stuff. Who's grieving?
Mhm.
Are we clear why we have to make the change? Because if this is why are we making this, like, right? But now, that makes so much more sense. Then we get to what's the neutral zone, and I would say here's where we live often, and you have opportunities, but there's also like dangers. And so in years past, when some changes have happened, I was always confused. Why are people like, I mean, it just felt like they like reacted. Like, I'm like, we went from a 9:30 service and an 11 o'clock to we added a service that are like, I can't believe we're doing this. And you're like, but it was funny when we went from 3 services to 2 services, someone's just like, not a fan. And I'm like, we're in. I thought like, and we went from 3 to 2, but like we had room post-COVID kind of thing. Here's the change. Here's what I didn't realize. The place they like to eat lunch wasn't open after the first service, but it was open when we had 3 service. It was open after second service. And I've basically created 30 minutes of them not knowing what to do with themselves. And it's my fault. And they're and I'm like, I thought we were talking kingdom stuff here. We're talking lunch, which, and so there's this ways where like we have no idea what else people are attached to sometimes.
That's true.
In the changes that we make.
You said this too before, like you don't know what their history with change is, what things have been. Yeah.
So true. So true. Like, how would you flesh that one out? Like,
just the person who grew up with instability or things that were changed, that were negative changes that came out of nowhere for them. No one helped walk them through it. So their context, when they hear change, it's going to feel heavier than somebody who's like, oh yeah, I'm used to this working out.
Yeah. One of my pastor friends recently told me, he's like, I've noticed people aren't big fans of surprises, but they like hearing secrets. And I was like, that's some interesting language. But what he was getting at is just like, hey, just wanted to let you know, like, we're not doing that anymore. Surprise. Versus like, hey, I want to let you in. We're going to make an announcement. It's going to be like, like insider information, like, just that whole idea of like surprise, you just like, you recheck your footing. You're like, can I hold this? Another thing that I think happens in that neutral zone. Okay. Is old weaknesses that we used to kind of like just let be, all of a sudden reemerge with more glaring reality. An example for us at the Bridge Church would be communication. Internal communication is always challenging with a growing team. When there was just me on staff, we were at our very best in communication with the team. However,
you just talk to yourself.
I did. And it was beautiful, beautiful. 20 plus staff, right? And then you've got seasonal staff, and we got all of a sudden you're just like, we're not always, and so then we're always trying to find a better way, right? Like we text message, or are we using Trello? Let's just send an email. We're using Slack, and all of a sudden it's like, man, when we made this change, the number of times we're like, hey, no one said if I'm supposed to, hey, curious if anyone is aware of, let's go with the example of Brielle. She had a baby, and so she has stepped down. She's going to stay on as a dream teamer. But I'm learning more and more about what she did in her absence, right? Because you're like, oh, that was just thought through. That was made. That was just done for us. Yeah. So now in this season, we're like, oh, like things get exposed that you didn't know, both like what was being done or what was challenging. And I think another one, this is along with communication, is hear things out of order. And I think if you're a leader, even in your own home, who should hear things first, right?
That's good.
It's funny when Jenny goes, so I was talking to Blythe and she said that you're going to North Carolina. I was like, oh, yeah, I forgot to tell you. And then she's like, and she said you're bringing her, during the school. I'm like, yeah, it seemed like a good idea, right? You know, we have enough trust built up, but and then at work, like someone asked me a question. I'm like, well, here's how I'm thinking about it. That's probably not the normal person I would have the conversation, but I'm an open book. Like I'll just share anything. And if you ask, you're going to get real-time information, at which point that information got passed to 2 other people, at which I get a text like, hey, heard about this. And you're like, yeah, it happens. It happens. So all this to say, there's an ending and we grieve and we celebrate what was good. Like when we went from 1 service to 2 services, we're just like, isn't God great? Like when we went from 1 campus to 2, when people transition off the team for whatever reason, like we celebrate, we grieve, we move to a place of, okay, this is a little crazy. And we got to be careful about communication. We got to watch, like, man, people's emotions were attached to who they work with, but there's also these opportunities that come in this time. And I'm talking about the time that's the gray area. Like we don't know. We're gonna hire some people to grab, but we're not there yet. So we're living in like they're gone, whoever they be. Lord, let them be amazing.
Amen.
Let them be amazing and love you. And they're coming. We're here, which creates some unique opportunities, right? And so, how have you seen us try to take advantage of a season of neutral zone, of gray area?
That's a good one.
Okay,
I wasn't ready for that.
I think it makes you have to decide. You kind of have to streamline your priorities.
Yes.
I had this word picture of, like, you know, when you put a car in neutral, it still has a really slow pace to it. It can still move forward. But if you try to hit the gas, it just goes, it doesn't do any good. And so just that idea.
I love that word
like,
picture.
You kind of have to be willing to move at a slower pace and realize it's not the hit the foot on the gas season. Okay. It's we can move with what we have. But I've seen us even say we can't do what we want to do, or we're not where we want to be, you know, in the neutral, but it's okay. We allow ourselves to like slow down in the season.
That's really good. I think that's, the pace. I think that's a huge thing. And then I'd also just say, like, in the season of the bridge that we're in, like, I think communication is huge. And like, it's almost like you look around at the people you're in the transition with, and it creates a little bit of sense of bonding of like,
definitely.
I pray a year from now, we're like, man, remember when we went through that season where like nobody was here, you know, like we were in it together.
You're like, which one?
Exactly. So it's always happening. But like that, I feel like if you can have grace for each other, it does create that type of grace relationship where you're in stride together, you're carrying the load together. And you got to keep communication high to do that. But
yeah. Piggyback off of that, prior to these transitions, it was unusual for Brielle and I to meet every other week. Now, Logan and Angie and I'm like, we're going to meet every week. You can text whenever you want. Like the meeting schedule, I just mixed it up. Now, if in a year they still have this, like, hey, we're always every week. Like, I'm like, well, that isn't sustainable. But in this time, we're going to reestablish more communication opportunities, and that bond is forged. I think about what you said about like reestablishing what a proper pace is. We have gone and tried to simplify as many things as we can from a worship team standpoint. We're like, let's not introduce as many new songs. Let's try to grab a hold of more well-known songs to add more congregate. Like we've just adjusted some of that. I'm a guy who likes to think a year and 2 years out, and I'm more prone to go like, okay, in the next month, this is what we want the win to be. I'm not trying to take on the hill. We're just going to make it the next step. And so like it, said another way, I'm just trying to lower as much urgency in as many areas as possible. So we're making allowances for like, oh, that didn't get done. That's okay. Yeah. But we aren't saying that about like the sermon on Sunday. We're not saying that about like launching small groups. Those are still priorities. But there's other things that are like, did we get that new graphic? And it's like, it's all right. It's okay. You know, like, hey, did we introduce that song? Yeah, no, it's okay. So I think that's part of it. Now, I don't know if you guys remember this, but the neutral zone of neutral zones. I mean, we're in one now, but like there was a time when we were operating in Minneopa with our offices. Do you remember this?
Yeah.
And do you remember the bathrooms that were carpeted? Oof.
Sure do. Remember the smell still.
Oh, if you can imagine something bad, make it worse. Make it worse.
The upstairs one was carpeted brown.
It was just
brown.
Originally?
Oh, don't. So we're officing out of there, and yet we had bought the hub, and we are in the process of building it out for our office space. However, the timeline we were given was it will get done, and it was just in this land of we don't know. So now we're faced with like we're working in what would typically be known as like OSHA would not approve. This is hazard to health kind of. Do we invest money into something and we're not going to get any of it back? Or do we just like, no. And then the beautiful scenario happened. I don't know if you guys remember this, but then the people we were renting Minneopa from decided to rent it out to someone else and we got kicked out and the new space wasn't done. There are moments where, okay, we have officially ended Minneopa and we are not where we want to be. And I would say this is where you will find that people thrive. I found some people who loved like, man, we were working all together and like we crammed into the coffee shop and and then there's other people who like started to like, cause like we were missing some structures and things like that. And it was just the way, and I share the memory of that because at some point the offices did get done and we moved in and we're in the beginning. Again, not start. Start was like the first day, but then there were the days after that. Yeah. And slowly a conversation came up with a couple of staff people who said, I miss it when. And beginnings in some ways remind you of what has ended, not just the ending, but the neutral zone ends as well. Like there would be do you remember when we used to blah, 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 blah? How come we don't do that anymore? I'm like, because we have nice offices. And before, like, it didn't matter what we did, but now it matters what we do, right? Good stewards. And so when you leave that neutral zone, that gray area, and you're in a new beginning, what I have found to be true is you have the early adopters and the late adapters. Yeah. And there's this tension that people should be given permission for. Absolutely. That, but the conversation needs to happen. And we need to go back. What was it about that? Well, it was just like, it felt like we were more connected. Okay. So we got to figure out how to bring connection. And so even beginnings form new endings. Yeah. Does that make sense? And so, like being able to retell the stories is so good. Just a few weeks ago when we were like right before Toby left, I have a YouTube channel. I hope you never find it. I hope you never find it. It's like videos from the first 3 years of the Bridge Church. So like Sophie's not born or like barely infant. And I used to have one of those flip, I don't know, like Sony made them or Philips. Yeah. And it was like it was just the way you would record videos. That wasn't like the big, kind of thing. And I didn't know what to do with them because there's only so much memory. And so I just loaded them up to YouTube. So that's where they live. Don't find them. But one night at dinner, we pulled them up and you're just like, you replay where you've been, but those stories, what they did was they cemented where we were. Like rewatching the one of like Toby and Lydia fighting the dad guys. That's how they said bad guys. They dad guys, and they were going to get them. And you're just like, oh. So we're not in that season, but we could still cherish where we've been. Like we're no longer one campus. Man, but then also it forges a foundation of where God's doing. Yeah. 4 different locations. Like, look what God, like our kids are like, there's just something about that beginning that creates this opportunity for us to both remember and we're going to talk to you later. All right. So there we go. I think there's these moments where like retell the stories. Yeah. Retell the stories because it also gives us I think, a boldness and a courage and a faith and a resilience to make it through what we're currently going through. The hardest thing I ever did was starting the first service until I had to start a second one.
Mm-hmm.
And that was super hard until we started a third one. And that was super hard until we started, get this, a fourth one. And now we're doing 9. And like, that's, each time it's harder, but I'm like, we got there.
Yeah.
Last thoughts on this idea of change, transition, things that have been helpful, intriguing. You know, we talk about it a lot as a team.
You.
Yeah, I think whoever's listening, whatever change you're going through, I think it is like, whether it's in your family that you're experiencing or it is professionally or even just in your personal life, it is good to be aware. Like the awareness, I think, of what you're talking about today is the first thing to let know, so that you can celebrate and grieve what's gone, and you can have grace for yourself in the in-between. And then know that, I like the idea of you're sharing, like you're kind of compounding the transitions in your life, that hopefully if you can look back, it'll give you confidence and faith for the transitions that are next. I think it's so good.
Yeah. And as you were talking about kind of looking back to seasons we've been in the neutral and looking back at those fondly, just reminds you, like, it's okay to grieve and it's okay to be okay in that, because you don't want to miss it. My wife, she's just good at reminding me, is like, sometimes she'll say to me, like, if you think it gets better, any better than this, like there's always going to be new problems, new changes. So like, how do you be present in what is and not just be like, well, I'll start acting normal or being okay once the new beginning starts. So don't miss it.
Yeah. Don't miss where. And so last word to leaders: change and transition operate best when you have earned trust. And I would just say, if you can't gauge where you are from a trust standpoint, tread lightly. But the higher trust is, the more they're with you, heart and soul, the more you can kind of like rally them behind. It doesn't make it not like there aren't things to still mourn, but I'm telling you, if trust is missing, the change will get a lot of kickback. But if trust is high, there is forward momentum and rallying that can take you even further than what you thought. My hope is that you've enjoyed something different. Catch you on the next